Good evening and welcome, everyone. My name is Rabbi Efrem Goldberg, and I have the privilege of serving as one of the rabbis of the Boca Raton Synagogue, and it's an honor to have you join us for this critically important conversation, a conversation that we hope will begin tonight but will continue at communities across not only America but around the world, addressing a topic that is critically important for us to be concerned about, sensitive to, and to do everything we can to support going forward. I'm truly honored to be joined by my dear friend Moshe Yachness, who is the founder and director of Onward Living, as well as several other rehab programs, and a leader in this area. And to be joined by my new friends, Moshe F and Yuri B, who have tremendous courage being with us, sharing their stories, their insights for us to learn from, not simply to listen to voyeuristically or vicariously, but to listen to and to learn from, so that we can be best positioned to help people going forward. We are really excited tonight to be launching a combination or a collaboration between the Boca Raton Synagogue and Onward Living, but we're hoping will really be a pilot program which is emulated and which is reproduced, as we say, around the country and around the world. Onward Living is an amazing recovery program we'll hear more about from its founder, Moshe, momentarily. Right now it's for men, and that's why our panelists are men this evening, but it's constantly expanding and growing and serving the broad needs of the Jewish community and beyond. And the new program that we're launching is called Adopt. It's a collaboration of Boca Raton Synagogue, a vibrant, active center of spirituality, of Jewish life, Jewish learning, Jewish living, and the Onward Living Recovery Program, who historically, many who are in recovery have been ostracized or driven away. They are distanced from their community, sometimes from family, sometimes it's leadership in the religious community who are even partially responsible for what drove them towards a life of substance use and abuse. And the ability to remarry and reconnect, the ability to provide a source of support of a Jewish community with those in recovery is what this program is all about. And it couldn't happen without the generosity of our dear friends, the Wine Pearls, who are sponsoring this pilot program in memory of their beloved son, Jonathan. Johnny was a really remarkable young man who unfortunately fell prey to this illness, to this challenge, and left this world way too soon, but not before leaving an impact, not only on his family who loved him, but on his students and on the community. Everybody knew him. He was a gentle soul, a gentle giant, and in some ways his soul was almost too good. It couldn't bear the pain and the injustice of this world. And in the attempt to try to navigate that, he was unable to and lost that battle and left this world. And his family, the Wine Pearls, really amazing people, as part of their grieving, have decided to dedicate and to support this initiative. And we're incredibly, incredibly grateful to them. And so we thank you from the bottom of our hearts. Community addiction can't be swept under the rug. There can't be stigma and there can't be shame. It's in the backdrop of shame, it's in the shadows of shame that Moshe has taught me for a long time, that unfortunately this behavior takes place and it becomes compounded. And the more that we pull it out from under the carpet and even are willing to share a spotlight, which is what we're doing in this conversation this evening, the more that we can take away the shame and people can get the help that they need or avoid falling into the problem to begin with, or find the support and the love and the sensitivity that they deserve. And that's our role, that's our responsibility. Community leaders, educators, parents, and all members of the community all together. A community is supposed to be a safe space, a warm and welcoming and non-judgmental place for people to come to, even with their challenges and imperfections, because which of us don't have those? It's a place that we should be loved for who we are. And that's what this new initiative and relationship are all about for the Boca Raton Synagogue, for BRS to be that place and that destination for those who are in the Onward Living program as part of their recovery, to see as part of the solution, not part of the problem. It's part of a support system, not something antagonizing, ostracizing, or driving away. And so tonight we're going to hear their incredible stories, Moshe and Yuri, who courageously are going to share them with us. And we'll have a conversation to learn more about what we can take away. We have the expertise of Moshe Yachness, as I mentioned, really recognized around the world as an expert and authority in this area and a leader in this area. And we'll close by telling you more about the program. And for those families who want to sign up, who would like to get involved in this partnership, in this collaboration, we welcome eagerly everyone's efforts, because it takes a community. Before we begin and turn it over to our panelists, I want to welcome Moshe Yachness. Moshe, opening thoughts.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you. First of all, thank you all for joining and listening this evening. It's your work and your allocation of time that allows us to continue doing what we do. And thank you, Moshe, for your courage and Yuri for your courage of sharing your stories this evening. And of course, Rabbi Goldberg, thank you for really being a leader in opening up the shul's doors and encouraging families to get involved on so many levels, in so many ways. We appreciate it so much. And on behalf of the individuals that can't express thank you, I say thank you for them. And of course, the Wine Pearls. This program is L'Zecher Nishmas Yonatan Ezra ben Avraham, and I had the opportunity to sit in the dining room, the Wine Pearls dining room, and speaking with Jonathan's sister and his mom and his dad, and just sitting there in the dining room was really empowering to me, because I saw a family that was committed to doing what they can, recognizing that there's a deep issue in our community, and we're super excited. We'll talk a little bit more later down in the program about what the initiative is, the Adopt program, but I just want to acknowledge their work and their partnership in this as well. So thank you, and I guess we'll pass it to
We'll
Yuri.
take it from there. Thank you. So Yuri, we're going to begin with you. Thank you again so much for being with us. Thank you for the courage to share, and tell us a little bit about your background, your story, and why you're here.
Okay. First of all, it's an honor to be here. My name's Yuri, 36 years old. I'm a grateful recovering addict. So I guess my story, starts off pretty normal. I grew up in Chicago, 2 brothers, 2 sisters, religious family. Went to pretty religious school, elementary school, and then continued on to, yeshiva in New Jersey, and then in Miami, and then on to, to Israel for a couple of years in the Mir. And, I would say that from the start, I was a little bit different, than everybody else. In elementary school, I was the kid who had the TV in the house. And that, followed me throughout elementary school. Then when I went to yeshiva,
Followed you in the way others looked at you and the way you thought of yourself.
No, in the way others looked at me, the way I was treated, the way rebbeim, comments that were made, and just, it was just like it was a known thing, which in turn made me feel, like a little bit like I didn't belong. And then, going on to yeshiva, there was a certain standard, that was set with other kids in my class, and just the way it was that you wanted to go to a good yeshiva with a good reputation, and so there was that pressure to do that. And the same thing really continued there. I had my ups and downs in yeshiva, out of yeshiva, on to the next one, just trying to, find my footing, which, turned out was not easy. And then, before I knew it, I was back in America after going to Israel. I was 20 years old. Within a month or two, I was engaged.
Wow.
Married at 20, had my first child before 21, and before I knew it, I was 25 years old, married with 3 kids, 3 beautiful daughters. And, just the pressures of life at that point, caught up to me, I would say. Also at that time, I had a lap band surgery, and I lost about 150 pounds.
Wow.
And so that was really the first time in my life that I really felt this confidence about myself, and at this point I was working, traveling for work, I had some money, and I guess I started, at that point something inside of me said, like it's time to live a little bit. And so,
How did you cope in those years before, when you felt like the outsider and you felt judged and you were going from yeshiva to yeshiva? You just kept it, you bottled it up inside?
Yeah, there was really nothing and nobody, that I felt, that I could open up to about it.
So you were lonely. Would loneliness be the word you would describe?
I would say, lonely, and probably just a little bit of shame as well. So, I decided at the age of 25 that I was going to live life the way I wanted to live life at that point. I felt that I had done everything that everyone expected me to do. I had tried, and I had a family, but I just didn't feel like I was getting what I wanted from life. And so that's when things started for me, traveling a lot. I was introduced to certain drugs, and that really started a 10-year run of just drugs, alcohol, partying, being away from my family, and basically manipulating everybody around me and every situation, work, family, friends, to make it work so that I could do what I wanted to do.
Now, I assume it didn't go overnight from the very first time you tried a drug or had your drink to a life of addiction. So how did it spiral? How did it escalate?
So, I mean, what it really spiraled from recreational drug use and having fun to addiction and no longer having any fun at about the age of 29, 30, when I had a business deal that went bad, something I had been working for my whole professional life, and with some people in the community, and it went south, and all of a sudden I was on the outside, looking in back to where I had been several years before. And so at that point I became the victim, and my drug use turned from fun, recreational, let's go, let's travel, turned from that into I'm not happy, I'm the victim, and that became my best friend, and it quickly turned from going out and having fun to really being isolated and just being by myself for several years, using drugs without any regard for anything else that was going on.
It's an amazing thing because we went from you using the word loneliness to that the drug was your best friend. So the vacuum or the hole was the sense of loneliness, and what it was filled with, the friendship, became the drug. I don't know if you're comfortable sharing what drugs it was or how somebody gets exposed to or got them or how it escalated, and how were you able to balance life? How were you functioning as a husband and a father and still working with the drug use? Did the people around you know about it? Were they challenging you? Were in denial about it? Or were you able to somehow pull it all off?
Well, I would say that the drug use started with some marijuana, and then it escalated to some party drugs, ecstasy, Molly, and once that started, that was the fun phase for me. Then it ended up escalating into cocaine and crack cocaine, and that was really the last 2 or 3 years of my using, where it was no longer fun. It was something I had to do. And then as far as, juggling, how did I do it? I thought I was the world's greatest, juggler for several years. I mean, nobody really knew. Definitely did not know that I was using drugs and that using, those types of drugs and at the level I was. Towards the end, family knew something was going on. They didn't know exactly what. But yeah, my life every day was waking up trying to figure out, okay, how am I going to be able to do what I have to do and use drugs and still manage to pay the bills and be there as a father, be there as a husband. And, I would say for a long time, I just got by, barely by the skin of my teeth, making everything stay, juggling and keeping everything afloat. But with, like most things, there comes a day of reckoning. And, when that day came, it was, I ended up in the hospital, woke up with my family surrounding me, my siblings, my parents, my wife. And the secret was there was no secret anymore.
It was an overdose? What had happened?
Yeah, it was an overdose, yeah. I went out and I just got out of control and, passed out in the Uber, and the Uber driver had to call the paramedics. And then that's how I ended up in rehab for the first time. So, that was the beginning of my journey through, recovery. It didn't take the first or second time that I was in rehab. And that's when, my family was introduced to Moshe, and I ended up coming down to Florida to Onward Living. And that was the turning point for me. I didn't come without first kicking and screaming in the beginning. I fought, the program for a couple weeks, at every turn. I didn't, I was at that time 34 years old with 3 kids, and I had, financially I was taken care of in Chicago. So I didn't want to live in a house with a bunch of 20-something-year-old single guys, and go get a job. I ended up getting a job at a warehouse, filling online orders for $7-something an hour. At that point, I felt that all of that was beneath me. That this is not. I shouldn't be doing this. But looking back on it, really what it was is that I was scared. I didn't know if I could do it. I didn't think I could go to a warehouse for 5-6 hours a day and work. Because although I had been working in Chicago, again, I had been manipulating everything to my advantage. So I was very comfortable. And so this, program at Onward really took me out of my comfort zone and pushed me to do things that I was not comfortable doing. But that was, where I was able to slowly, build the confidence that I can do this. I can do what millions of people do every single day, and feel good about it.
What was different about Onward from the other times that you had gone to rehab? Why did the others fail, and why, thank God, and please God, is this one succeeding?
Well, I think that the first couple times I did rehab, I was really not. I didn't think it was as bad as everyone was making it out to be. Mm-hmm. So I don't think the desire was there to get clean and do anything about it. Once I ended up in Onward, at some point it hit me, just how bad it was and where I was and what my life had become. And then it was just a matter of either accepting that and trying to fix it or continuing to fight. And at that point, I was just too tired to fight anymore. Mm-hmm. So I decided, let's try it. Onward, combining the clinical side of rehab with, the real life experiences of going and getting a job, living in a house where you have responsibilities, together with doing marriage counseling with Moshe and my wife on a weekly basis. And then some family work as well of my parents and different things. That was the beginning of, I was in Onward for about 4 months. And, before I got there, my marriage was in turmoil is an understatement. But by the time I came back to Chicago, it was at the point where I was committed, my wife was committed to making it work. And so everything that happened at Onward, put me in a position to be able to go back home to Chicago and, continue to, get my life back on track. 4
months is a long time, and it's important for the people watching to know that just like these problems don't happen overnight, they're also not healed overnight. And you don't go to a rehab for a day or a week or a month, but it takes a while, and yet she and they were patient. I have so many questions, but I know that we also have a lot more to cover. But let me ask you this. Yuri, could you talk for a moment about the role of your family when you woke up in the hospital and they were around your bed? What kind of support do you think family, I don't want to ask you about your family in particular unless you want to share, but what's important for somebody who's going through this to see or receive from their family? What role, if any, did community play? Did you have a relationship with any rabbanim, any rabbis? Did they check on you? Did they connect with you? Do you turn to them still for support? What were the reactions of the people around you?
So I'm very lucky that my family was extremely supportive. Like I said, I woke up in the hospital and everybody was there. And at that point, everybody knew what I had been doing. And, my wife was standing right there. And instead of, using that as an out, to say I can't do this anymore because things hadn't been good as it was. Mm-hmm. She didn't. My parents just kept telling me over and over that they love me and they're here for me, and if I'm going to do this, they'll support me. So I was very lucky in that in that regard. As far as community, not really. I have one Rebbe that was my 10th grade Rebbe, who I'm still close with, and but it was, there was someone in the community who linked me up with Moshe and Onward. So, appreciated him for that.
So last question, because again, I said we have so much to talk to, we could really do this for hours, and I think it'd be interesting and instructive to the people listening. Tell us where you are now. How's it going?
So now I'm about 2.5 years clean. I'm living in Chicago with my wife and kids. Things are great. I just moved into a new house in May. And what I could say is that I'm just, life is not easy. It's not perfect. There's ups and downs. There's challenges all the time. But the main difference is that, like I'm in the game. I can manage things that are tough and that are hard, as opposed to before where I used to just run away from it. I have a sponsor. I work a 12-step program. I'm actually working part-time now in the rehab facility that I went to several years ago, as a technician, helping other, people try to get recovery. So it really is like a full 180. I'm on my 9th step right now, which is making amends. And, I've been doing that with several family members and really close friends. And it's just amazing to see, the impact that I had on a lot of people when I was in my addiction. And, to see now how different it is amazing.
It's really an amazing story, Yuri. Thank you so much for the courage to share it with us. And you should continue to have success and happiness and joy and good health in every which way. And it's also another important lesson is that even when after 4 months in rehab and you come home and things are well, you're never done. It's a problem that's always managed, it's never ever conquered. And the continual work in the program and so on, and its success is critical. And the moment you drop out and you think that you're done, you've conquered it, is when you become vulnerable again. Moshe F.
Yes.
Thank you for being with us as well.
Thank you for having
the
me.
courage to share your story. And tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay. Well, first, Yuri, thank you very much for sharing your story. Thank you, Moshe, for having me on. And thank you, Rabbi, for having the courage to reach out to the recovery community and to help the community as much as possible. My name is Moshe. I'm 24 years old. And I guess I'll just start with some basic background. I was born in New York, went to pretty religious schools growing up. I moved to Miami with my family in 2003. It was at that point where I noticed something very strange happening, where I felt like everyone around me had read a certain manual on how to live life, how to deal with situations. And for some reason, I wasn't given this manual. I always felt like there was 1 degree of like a difference between me and everyone else. But it never really manifested itself in anything yet. But I always felt like a little bit different. I felt like I was on the outside. I always felt like people were either judging me or keeping something from me. And around, I would say probably like, middle school, I really, those differences, I should say those feelings started to really grow and became more intense. And, I guess I would say like the first time where I turned to like an external source for comfort and for really something to fill a void was, I was always constantly watching TV like that, like it was, that was my first thing was TV. It was like constant,
The escape.
The escape. It was like, whenever I had a chance, that's what it would be. And also it was food. It was constantly eating to just numb pain or emotion, or even whether I was happy, whether I was sad, depressed, any emotion that I felt, I had to either watch something or eat something with that. And then I went to several different yeshivas throughout high school. At around 9th grade, I kind of came to like this realization that I didn't want the whole Jewish thing. I just didn't want it. I felt like, I think there was like a sense of if I can't do everything, meaning that if I can't follow everything the way that it's supposed to be done, then I shouldn't do it at all, because what's the point? And I tried constantly to like move from place to place, thinking that, you know, if I would go from this yeshiva to like a little more lenient yeshiva, then I would slowly try to get myself out of just the entire yeshiva system, that I would be happy.
Did you ever speak to anybody? Was there a Rebbe, a teacher, a family member that you said, here's where I'm coming from, here's where I'm at? Is there another approach to Judaism? Am I wrong in my thinking that it's all or nothing? And if you reached out, did people respond?
So I think there were people that I could have reached out to, but the fact is that I didn't know how to elaborate what I was feeling. It was still a very new feeling to me, and I didn't know how to explain it. You know, it just, how do I explain something like this? It just, and I also, there were other kids around me who felt the same way, you know, and they were going through the same struggles. So it almost felt like it was normal. But I know how that manifested itself and how that, how I dealt with that might have been different. At around 10th and 11th grade, what happened was, I think I identified for myself a kind of lifestyle or way of life that, okay, you know, this is you know, how I want to live my life. This is how I want to go. And you know, that was around friends, certain friends that I would hang out with, and their lifestyle. And along with that lifestyle came, you know, drugs and alcohol, but what happened is that the first time I used it was, you know, it was great, you know, it was nice, and I told myself, okay, fine, this is the epitome. This is like the apex. This is like what I'm living for. I have to work, you know, I go to school, I work, I do all these things so that, you know, I can just enjoy life. This
is the reward. This is what you're doing it
right,
for.
Right. So I found it, and I found the answer. This is, you know, my entire life now revolves around feeling good. So by the end of 12th grade, you know, I was in another school, and that's really when my, you know, as I was getting older, I had more freedom, and that's when the usage picked up. And then I went to Israel for a year and a half, and in Israel, that's really when I think my usage spiraled out of control.
How do you understand why people around you didn't see that was happening? How were you able to get through high school? How were you able to be in Israel for a year and a half, and no one saw a usage that was spiraling out of control? They didn't see signs or symptoms or confront you? Or
well, I would say for most of my high school, the use, it wasn't terrible. Like, it was, you know, it was recreational, and I think it wasn't like I was, you know, it wasn't I was always high, I was always drunk. It was, you know, maybe I was unhappy, maybe I never felt content. Maybe those were signs. But then again, you know, what teenager really is, you know, really truly happy and content with what they're doing? So, you know, it's easy to just pass it off as, yeah, it's just a stage, you know, they're just, you know, he's just going through something, you know, he'll find himself.
In Israel was the same thing? You were able to...
Well, in Israel, it's, you know, part of the culture. You know, you have, you know, the culture is, you know, the guys go out, you know, they have fun, and they come back, and, you know, they do what they have to do. And, you know, I would say that, you know, in my second year, you know, I kind of was faced with a decision that I've been, you know, that's come up throughout my life. Well, it was, okay, Moshe, you're at a point now. You can either choose to, you know, take responsibility for your life and admit that, you know, admit certain truths and come to terms with the fact that, you know, life isn't all about, you know, just having fun and enjoying yourself, and that there are other things that you have to do. Or, you know, or you're not ready to give that up yet, and you're just, you know, you want to continue on the path that, on the path that you were on. And I remember clearly, you know, when it was, what happened, it came to a crossroad, make a decision, and I left. I just went home, and hindsight is 2020. What would have happened if I would have stayed? Maybe I would have, finished my year in Israel and I would have gone a different path. But that's not what happened. At that point, I wasn't ready to take that step. So then I came home and I had all these ideas of grandeur that, what I'm going to do. I'm going to get a job. I'm going to work, and I'm going to have a huge house with all these nice cars. I'm going to party all the time, and it's going to be great. And then I think the next day I got home and I just got high, and then for the next, I think, 3 years, it was a constant struggle to even do anything that was productive. It was I might have gotten a job here or there, but all those ideas that were in my head, what I'm going to do with myself, just went out the window. And it came to a point where I wouldn't want to leave my room. I remember towards the end, like, this was the feeling that I had, that my father came into my room. He's like, "Moshe, you have to get up." And I'm like, he's like, "Yeah, you do something." He's like, I'm like, the walls of my house are poisoning me. That's what I said. I said I felt that every second that I was alive, that it felt so heavy and burdensome, and I couldn't do anything about it. There were times where, like, you felt like you're having an out of body experience where you don't want to do something, yet your body is going through the motions of doing, habit, where it's already a habit. And then after a certain point, I remember my parents came over to me. They said, "You need help." And I remember my initial reaction was no way. But in my head, I said, thank God somebody finally, they definitely realized I had an issue before, but somebody's finally taking action, because I did not have the courage or the strength to admit by myself that I had an issue. So, and that's, within a week, my parents were introduced to Mo, and I went to Onward, and I was there for 6 months. Yeah.
It's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing with us as well. Moshe Yachness, there's so much to learn from, but let me ask you in this way. I've had the privilege a few times to attend AA meetings to give people a medallion for some milestone they had reached, and I remember once one of the members standing up, and she said, everyone in this room, we're all damaged. That was the word she used. And I remember sitting there as an observer thinking the exact opposite. The people outside this room, they're the damaged ones. The ones who don't know they have the addiction, the ones who aren't confronting it, the ones who aren't working on it, the ones still walking around lonely and numbing themselves with these really unhealthy things. The people in the room who are working the program and who are really genuine and authentic and in touch with themselves, they're the ones who aren't damaged. It's heroic. And this is not a new teaching. It's, of course, Chazal and Pirkei Avos. You're warriors. The two of you are heroes. And the battle, the daily grind, and it's never over. You can never move it from the battlefield to conquer territory. It's a battle that's going on. But that's what makes you heroic and special. So, is that what you see? Do you see these two as damaged or undamaged because of what they're doing? And is their story unusual, or is it really reflective of what you're doing in your amazing work?
Yeah, so it's, again, thank you, just to echo, Rabbi, your words. Thank you, Moshe and Yuri, for joining the program this evening and for sharing courageously your stories. And of course, thank you again, Rabbi, for really spearheading, opening up your mind and opening up the shul's doors for this population and the people that are struggling and so desperately want and need the warmth of the shul to re-engage. Napoleon has there's a story that to say about Napoleon when he would send out his troops to a new island. After the soldiers would arrive at that island, they would turn around and burn the ships. And I think the messaging behind that is we have no choice. We are fighting for survival. And I think the story of addiction and the story of recovery is that battle, where the pain and the destruction left behind is just so intolerable. A person cannot tolerate it anymore. And the courage and the ability to just persevere through all the chaos on a behavior level, on an emotional level, within the family construct is humongous amounts of energy and strength. And that's really a very common theme. So to answer your question, where, the people in the rooms are the most courageous out there. Far be it from the outsiders to judge the level of chaos and the ability and the strength, inner strength, to be able to persevere through it. And it really sheds some light into those of us around that individual struggling, where there's so much judgment made and there's so many assumptions about what's going on with that person, with that individual. And if we kind of just look under the hood a little and peek a little deeper into that person's soul, into that person's story, we'll see that it really is, strength and courage behind that.
So what would your message be? There's people watching live or who after the fact are going to listen, and they say, Yuri, Moshe, that's me. That's my story. I'm lonely. I'm an outcast. I'm being judged. Or I have all this visions of grandeur, and then I just have no drive. I don't get any of it done, and I feel like everyone else has a playbook I don't have access to. Or there's somebody watching or listening who says, that's not me, but maybe that's explaining my child or my sibling or my spouse, because I see those signs in them. What would your message be to the person who feels just like Yuri and Moshe?
Yeah, I think that the solution is out there. I think that, it's a two-step process. It's to really identify what those behaviors represent. Teenagers and young adults speak through behaviors, and whether it's isolation, whether it's chaotic behaviors, inconsistencies, that's them telling us that something's bugging them, something's wrong, there's pain, there's discomfort. Not to look away, not to brush it under the rug, not to deny that, I think is the first step. And then the second step is that there's a solution, there's a roadmap through incorporating some of the concepts of recovery, whether it's therapy on an outpatient level, on an inpatient level, whether it's support through a synagogue or through community members. But there's a solution out there. There are guys and there are people for decades on end that have found recovery and that are living a sober, happy life. So when there's life, there's hope, and I think that would be the message. It's a two-step: identify, and then look towards some system to be able to help educate around what the solution is going to be.
I want to ask both of our panelists and our expert, did this have to happen, right? Hashkafically, or from a bigger picture, philosophical perspective, we could say, it's good that it happened. You're both stronger. You've learned more about yourselves, and it's a good thing it happened in some way. What I mean by did it have to happen is, could the community, could those around you have responded earlier, have done an intervention, have been different in a way that would have identified the very thing that drove you towards that lifestyle earlier on and met that need? So if someone said, Yuri seems like he's lonely, he seems like he feels like an outsider, how do we reach out? Is there somebody who could have interacted with you in a different way? Or Moshe, someone could say he seems disconnected or detached or a step behind. What can we do to make sure that he feels he belongs? Because in the tragedies we've had in our community, and our community is no different than any other that's honest and addressing this, very often the people who unfortunately end up in a life of addiction or, God forbid, overdose, will describe that even from a young age, right? You talked about middle school, you talked about a young age, that feeling different, and yet nobody was there, nobody identified it. And they didn't fit the mold academically, spiritually, emotionally. So what could we be doing for the people today who don't fit that mold, today who feel like outcasts, today who are outsiders, who are lonely? What can be done? Can anything be done? And if so, what can be done and who can do it? Is it family? Is it teachers? Is it community? What can we do to both, on the one hand, have a mold, because it's important to have a model of what we're aspiring for, but on the other hand, also recognize that not everybody fits in it, or have multiple molds, or react differently. So I'm curious to hear from your experiences of your youth, and then Moshe as an expert in this area.
I would say that, for myself and for a lot of addicts, I was very good at hiding a lot of what was going on, for sure, once I got older. So, and then as well, when, for example, you go to shul on Shabbos and davening's over and it's time for Kiddush and everybody around you is drinking. excessively. At that point, nobody's really looking around and looking and saying, okay, who might have a problem? Also there's the education. I just don't think enough people are aware of what addiction really is and what to see and what to look for, to recognize if somebody has a problem.
What's interesting is both of your addictions really began before you ever met a substance, because you both described what precipitated it, what led to it, was that loneliness or were those challenges. So I guess that's my question, is even before you are introduced to the substance that at the time you think is the solution, could there have been a different solution? So what you're saying is very important, is that you hit it well. So people around you didn't necessarily know or couldn't have known, not necessarily anything they could have done.
Right. But I mean, what I'm grateful for at this point is that, I have 3 kids and entering their teen years. And because of what I went through and because of my addiction and now being in recovery, I have a certain, knowledge of how I want to raise my kids and how I want to be there for them the way they need me to be there for them. Not the way the community thinks they should grow up, not the way my neighbor thinks that this is correct, this is not correct, this school, that school. It's really about what my child needs, and that's really where I think the difference is. Today's day and age, we have to be able to look at, a child and not try to stick them in a certain box. And if that doesn't work, then you know what? All right, this one's just not going to do as well.
Right.
That's not going to work anymore.
That's important to point out that different communities have different boxes they try to put people in. So for some, it's a frum box, a yeshivish box, a yeshiva box. For others, it's the Ivy League or bust box. What would you do on the SATs? Did you get into Ivy League? How much money are you making? What kind of car you drive? And a lot in between. So it's not one community with one box. Different communities are trying to put people in different boxes, and it's important to love people for where they're at. Moshe, what would you say?
I would say that's a great question. Like Yuri said, I also, and most addicts and alcoholics, they're great at adapting. They're very good at hiding things, and they're very good at manipulating situations, people. I think it's very, very hard to detect, especially in younger kids, a trace or the beginnings of addiction, because they very well could just be, the kid's going through a hard time, and a lot of times that's what it is. It's the kid's going through something difficult. They're not alcoholics. They don't really have that. Life is happening. The AA book, they said that alcoholism, and you can replace it with whatever term you want, is really just a spiritual malady. That's what it is. So I think that if somebody really wants to get to the core issue of alcoholism, addiction, you have to have a solution for that spiritual malady. What that is, that's your job. That's not mine.
So I think, Moshe, you're highlighting a very important point. We have the vantage point of seeing, multiple individuals going through the recovery process and finding sobriety and engaging in their recovery paradigm. And one of the constants that we see is this point that you're referring to, is this profound loneliness, or this void, this inability to connect spiritually. And the argument can be made that spirituality really is about connection, right? That's the definition of spirituality, to feel connected to, whether it's family, whether it's friends, whether it's a higher power, Hashem. And I think therein lies the answer to the rabbi, to what you're asking, is, if we, the people around the individual struggling, are disconnected, right? If we're preoccupied by our world, our life, our distraction, and we're not in tune to listening to the needs of the child, even at a young age, then that's where the spiral starts to develop. And I can tell you that we've seen, dozens and dozens and hundreds of people that have been through the programs that really share that same, I don't want to call it the addict profile, but that same template definitely exists, where there's an inability to feel connected. And I think as a community, as a family system, we're able to create a platform for them to find that connection, which really talks a lot about, the
Perfect segue into our
program
program.
that
But before we get there,
yes. Okay.
So what would your message be to parents, particularly of young children who are still there's some runway ahead, about those connections? How important is it to get off your device and to spend some time with your child and to say, tell me what's going on in your world. Tell me how you're feeling. Tell me about your friends. Tell me. Yeah. Now, there are children who it'll be natural to shut down. There's a lot of kids. I've had teenagers through my home and still have teenagers, and often they'll grunt. You're lucky if you get the one-word answer. Right? The kiss of death is to ask, how was school today? You should never ask that. It's like the worst question a parent could ever ask a child. But are there a series of questions, and are there vulnerable moments that you can get a window into your child's soul, into their neshama, to have a better understanding, and most importantly, to create that connection, to validate feelings, and to open a conversation to make them feel comfortable to say, well, let me be honest. Yeah. Religion's not doing it for me today, or I have friends who are having a bad influence, or I feel very lonely, or I'm struggling every day. So what are the kind of things that parents could do to create those connections so that even before that loneliness ever kicks in?
Yeah. So, children model their life after their parents, definitely at a young age, as they're still molding and developing as their own identity and their individual, before they individualize. And I think that it's an awesome opportunity. I mean, think about the amount of time, if you just run the numbers, right? The amount of time that a parent spends with a child for years and years and years. 1, 2, 3, right? 7, 10, 12. I mean, the amount of hours that a child has the opportunity to watch a parent is tremendous. And, if us as parents could model vulnerability, could model, what attention and focus looks like, that educates a child that there's an approach to connection. There's an ability for me to connect because I see my mom and my dad, my father, my mother talk to each other without being distracted. So just simple modeling in the home environment is huge. Simple modeling when you're talking to a friend and your child, your young son or young daughter is watching you. Do you continue talking to that person? Do you say excuse me and then talk to your son or your daughter? These are the types of behaviors that children watch and absorb. So I think that's one very practical, answer to modeling what connection looks like and feels like. And the other opportunity that exists in the home pre-addiction is to give your children the language, right? Give ourselves a language. What does it mean when somebody has questions, right? To be able to create an environment where a question is allowed in the home, even if it's challenging and even if the answer is unclear for us. But the fact that a child can ask a question, the fact that even a young adult can ask a question is so critical. Moshe, you talked about that isolation and that the inability to really, question those questions that you had. If that could have been done, years prior, it might have changed the course. And this is, it's a serious course. It's a serious, a person has the ability to follow and to engage and to build connection, or God forbid to take that frustration and that pain and the heavy load of the walls of the house and steer it towards addiction.
Educators, parents, everyone feels like I'm going through my stuff. So it's very hard. Everyone's got their own anxiousness. Everyone's got their own struggle. Everyone's got their own stuff that they're going through. Sure. But yet the cost is so high to not carve out the emotional space and the time to do this with our children. And, there are teachers and educators in Rebbeim who have curriculum they got to cover. They've got Black Gemara they got to cover. But yet the stakes are so high to not notice the student in the classroom who looks like they're struggling or is a step behind or is really retreating or is acting in a lonely way. And for a parent, no matter what they're going through, stakes are too high to not make that individualized time for each of the children, as you say, to model the right behavior, to also interact and to engage children, to validate, to make them feel comfortable to share. Because these are some of the things you're doing an extraordinary job, and these two stories are extraordinary stories of recovery in defense after. But wouldn't it be amazing if we can go on offense before to make sure that nobody ever feels that they're ever even in that position to begin with, that they need to turn to the substance? So coming back, Moshe, to your point about really spirituality, the big book and 12 steps. First of all, Moshe, could you talk about, because some of our listeners don't know, they think, people who've only heard about the 12-step program or Alcoholics Anonymous in a book or a movie, a TV show, they may think it's incompatible with Torah or a Torah recovery system. They may not know that there's so much religious component to it, and that it's really beautifully compatible with much of what we believe. So do you incorporate 12-step and recovery within Onward Living and your other programs?
Absolutely. I mean, there's no question about it. There is such a close connection. Ultimately, it's really about, moving out of the driver's seat, and the addict, is grabbing on to being in control and manipulating the systems and the family around them. And really, spirituality at the core is recognizing in a humble way that there is a power larger than self. And that is the foundation of recovery. And humbly, I'll defer to you on this one, Rabbi, but I believe that is potentially the foundation of Judaism, where there is a higher power. There's a control system that is beyond the self. And very often addicts fall into addiction because they feel out of control, and they feel that there's so much chaos around them, so they grab onto the drug or the alcohol to try to position themselves and ground themselves, which is why recovery talks to, moving away from that driver's seat and deferring the self to a higher power. So there's a huge correlation between the two schools of thought, if you will, if I could even say that. And we definitely incorporate that into the program. It's part of everyone's story. It's a Jewish program with Jewish challenges, and therefore it's part of the trauma, it's part of the chaos, and therefore it needs to be part of the solution.
The meetings I've had the privilege of going to, I walked away feeling they were religious experiences, what I had. Maybe for the people who go or go regularly, they grab their cup of coffee, they go through the motions, they recite the different things that need to be said. But for me, it was a religious experience, first of all, to be in a room, as I said, of people who are confronting and tackling and battling their challenges. The fact that the program includes, as you say, submission, surrender, the notion of a higher power, the humility to introduce yourself and say, here's my name and here's the challenge I have, to be willing to share, to set aside ego, at least as an outsider, what I saw in that room. And I wish for this for our community. Wouldn't it be amazing if it's what Daily Minyan was? A room full of people who, are not differentiated by the car they drove there or the cost of the suit or the watch they're wearing, but it's the great equalizer. Everybody's vulnerable and equal when it comes to confronting the challenges that they had, the willingness to share. So it really is a religious experience, something amazing. But this is a perfect segue towards the last part of our program, and to talk about really, really exciting the collaboration that we're forming, hopefully the difference that we make. So I'm going to come back to you, Moshe, in 1 second. But first I want to ask Yuri and Moshe about what role community could have had. You've both gone through Onward, 4 months and 6 months. You were there for a long time. What do you think is the importance of this collaboration, the idea for those who want it, and not forcing it on anyone who's in recovery, but giving the option while in recovery to also be connected to a local community and to be able to see spirituality, Torah, davening, Jewish life, and to be connected to a family that you can, while you're distanced and far from your own, still, as appropriate, be invited, experience Shabbos, Yontif meals, experience times that you're seeing a happy and a functional family, and you're part of it, not to replace your own, but to help you go back to your own. What would that have been like through your recovery process? How important do you think it is for us to introduce now?
I think it's a very, very important. The main reason being just to have a feeling of, acceptance and no judgment from the community that might have been a big reason why, someone ended up where they, in this position. To be able to feel like, what, I'm doing what I need to do now. I'm confronting my problems, and I'm being accepted with open arms back into the community that ultimately, for everyone's different, but for me, for sure, you want to be a part of. You want to feel accepted, and you want to feel like part of the community. So I think it's extremely important to just have that, and I think that a family, not specifically your family, is also very important, because a lot of times that's what someone needs in order to get to the point where they can go back to their family.
Amazing. Yeah. Thank you.
I think it's critical that people in recovery have an outlet to connect to their roots, especially in a setting where there's no judgment. One of the things that recovery has helped me with was my entire life. It was Hashem is the king, the master of the universe. He's knower of everything. He's supreme. But I forgot one very, very important aspect is that he's my father. And just like a father loves his child without condition, that manifests itself by being around people in the Jewish community who are having a Shabbos meal, who are going to daven, and they're not judging you for what you're wearing, your haircut, what you're doing with your life. They just want to be around you because you're Jewish and you're a son of God, and that's all that matters. And that is the love aspect of our Father in heaven, and that's like so critical to recovery. And I think it's an amazing thing.
Thank you. That's why we're excited to be adding it. So, Moshe, could you talk about, clinically,
Sure.
the role of family and of reintegration, and then if you could spell out some of the details of this program, what
Yes.
people can look for.
Absolutely. So super excited. It's really a brand new initiative that I don't think has happens anywhere, and it really should happen everywhere because it really talks to the core of recovery. This unconditional love and acceptance and need to reintegrate with family systems and with community. Dr. Bowen, who is Murray Bowen, one of the founding fathers of modern day psychology, he talks a lot about and he writes a lot about the family system, and he defines it as an emotional unit. It's one unit. And in the recovery program, we understand that it's very often not about the individual struggling, but it's about the individual within the family system. Although the person doing the drugs and the alcohol might be the identified patient, but more often than not, it's really just a reaction to what the family look like and what the family dimensions and interactions are. So obviously, incorporating family work into recovery is critical, and it's something that we spend a lot of time and energy doing with that individual because it's critical for their healthy long-term recovery. And the idea is kind of an outgrowth of taking such a necessary clinical part of recovery and a void that exists while a patient is away from their family, and try to use the current setup to really start to create modeling for what a healthy family looks like and how an individual who's been somewhat ostracized can re-engage. That's the structure. Obviously our goal is for the individual. Children and parents deserve each other. They deserve each other before addiction. They deserve each other during addiction and after addiction. And if we can come in and partner with the shul to have patients or individuals that are in the recovery program spend time engaging in healthy family systems and learning and picking up some of the tools, then taking those messages and bringing them back home to their family, it's a really unique opportunity to do that. And that's really, in a nutshell, what the program is about. We have, a pretty exciting curriculum that we'll be rolling out for the Boca Raton Synagogue. There'll be a survey monkey going out, gathering some basic information about understanding what your family system is like, understanding what the motivation is for you as an individual, and for pairing up, somebody from the program who's courageous and willing to say, hey, I'm open, I need that connection, I'm looking for that non-judgmental environment. And then working with the individual and that adopt family together clinically to be able to set the roadmap for them to take those tools and bring them back to their own family. That's the objective.
So I'm hoping that people around the world are listening to this, and whether they're very aware personally and in detail, or this is the first they're learning about it, that it will continue the conversation, because that's how we can tackle this. So for our local Boca and BRS members, we will let you know, and we'll be in touch with you how you can get involved. And if you're a family that's interested in being matched and connected and being part of this incredible collaboration, then we will let you know how you can connect with us. It's important to point out that Onward Living is a non-profit. Part of the reason that we are connecting is not only because of Moshe's expertise and beyond that, in our community we have other connections to the program, but it's a non-profit. It's designed to help people. Many of these programs are they're just not affordable. They're impossible for people to attend. And part of the beauty of Onward is that it is structured as a non-profit, and it's there for the community, and it's there to be able to make sure that everybody who needs help can get their help. And as two non-profits, It's really a logical collaboration. So, from the bottom of my heart,